Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Another deep look into the hypocrites of science. We have the uh, physicist, the theoretical physicist who's been around for many years, Brian Greene, who's written books and who's been on many talk shows, fairly articulate for a dumb bunker and a dumbademia star. And we have Richard Dawkins, who has a very limited understanding. Mostly his field seems to be involved with what is considered evolution, etc. I'm not sure what else he has. He states that he has no background in physics in one of his. But let's get into the fact of that. They're telling us how they, particularly this particular a video, which is against religion, how they don't believe in anything out there that is not scientifically based. And of course, this is what you hear from most of these scientist types. And I'm not sure what to make of it when you listen to them, but you're always going to get contradictions. And the bottom line is these guys are going to show you what kind of hypocrites they are. And as we showed with people who basically state disinformation or misinformation, like I recently showed with Penn Jillette and Krauss, the physicist, as well, it's pretty shocking how these people don't have any proper backgrounds, don't have any concern for the facts, and don't bother to get basic but yet important details of where somebody's from, what they state, etc., as Penn Jillette just made statements that could only be interpreted as a pure fabrication. And here we're going to go with two people talking about how they don't believe in any kind of, quote, mystical stuff. Let's join the conversation here.
If one takes this metaphorical approach, as I was sort of describing it in that particular case, well, let me actually frame it somewhat differently. So, to what extent are you okay with? I don't know how else to say it, but irrational ideas. Can I just give you an example again?
Little bump here, but we'll get to it.
And my mother lives over here, 81st Street. She's in her 90s, and I called. She's always home. She doesn't really go out without me. I called, the answer machine picked up. She didn't answer. I called again. She didn't answer. I'm starting to really freak out. So I get in the taxi cab, and I'm racing down to 81st Street, and I'm telling you, in that taxi cab, I was praying to God that she would be okay. And I'm praying to God, and I know that I do not think there is a God, okay? This is a totally irrational thing that I'm doing. Let me just quickly say, if you're there, I'm sorry, all right? If you're, I just gotta hedge my bets, it's a conversation here. I'm just sort of saying how I feel. But I'm really praying, and when I got there and everything ultimately was fine, it felt like, a small miracle to me. Now,
what kind of hypocritical nonsense is this? Where these people go on shows and write books criticizing religious people, criticizing spiritual people that believe in something greater than themselves. And here's the guy, the minute he runs into a problem of a serious nature, of course, a 91-year-old mother has one foot on a banana peel and the other one in a grave. But needless to say, nobody wants anything to happen sooner than is forced upon them. But here's a guy who is calling on supernatural powers that he doesn't believe in to help him, but he'll criticize other people. This is the kind of hypocrisy that is really disgusting that we see, particularly from these scientific ties. Now, here's a guy who is an atheist, doesn't believe in God, talks about nothing but science, and is one of the first people to come out and criticize people who do. I'm sure he would be the first one to step up and say how silly biophysical, psychic power, or the human consciousness and mind is, that this doesn't make any kind of physics sense. as Sean Carroll has done in the past, even stating that in an introduction that he doesn't believe the mind can do anything, yet it's been proven to do it consistently. So what a hypocrite here. As soon as it suits him, this is the kind of statement that people make that erroneously, I believe, that there are no atheists if you're in a foxhole in war. Well, I think I'd be a big atheist in a foxhole in war. I'd be calling on my basic higher consciousness energies to keep me safe and to keep me aware of what was going on as people were trying to kill me. I wouldn't be calling on a mythical nothing in the sky that didn't do anything to stop the war to begin with. So it's the same thing here, that he wanted the mythical being in the sky that he doesn't believe in to intervene to keep his mother alive. What hypocrisy. This is unbelievable. That goes on consistently with these, they're really pseudoscientists, and they go to school and have their entire mind brainwashed with the common gobbledygook that is called regular science that hasn't achieved anything. We have no free energy to keep the planet alive. We have no cures for anything. And we don't work on the human condition, so we don't to try and stop killing each other all the time. But we can overlook the great science. After all, they've looked at the vibrations in the sky. So the whole idea is all this kind of nonsense. They want to tell you what they know when they know absolutely nothing. It's all nonsense. And we'll get into some of that as well, including mathematics here that we will review here soon. And also, let's hear from Dawkins here, but let's pick up here again.
Miracles. I believe that we're all bags of particles governed by the laws of physics, and there's nothing else besides that. But at the same time, I find it useful to hold these irrational ideas in mind at certain moments, and I don't give a shit that I do. Yeah.
Well, Brian Boy, you should. You should give a shit because of the fact that you daily put down everybody else. It's the scientists who've equipped the maniacs of this world with huge, dangerous weapons that can destroy the earth, as well as committing crimes against humanity. That's what you're doing, Mr. Greene, because you're suppressing technologies and aspects of life that could change the world, except when it comes to your own little personal comfort. That is really disgusting. These are your leaders. You want to fund these people. You want to give them tens of millions of dollars for their goofball institutions, dumbademia, who mostly live off of government money. This is what you get when you do that.
I would hesitate to spend the night in a notoriously haunted house. And the faintest...
Oh, this is a good night, man. That is so.
But I mean, we're both being irrational, and
Yeah.
and that is a sin.
I agree.
And here we go, Dawkins, the big rationalist. I'm afraid of them ghosts. I'm afraid of them ghosts. Did you learn that in Oxford? Did they teach you that? Well, don't go here, Mr. Dawkins, because there's a spooky little ghost. But remember, we have Harry Potter here to save you. But he'll be the first one, and has done in the past, to put down metaphysical realities of life and empowerments, because he's afraid of something, just as Brian Greene wants to believe in the boogeyman, because his mother's life is in danger, like the fact that any boogeyman would stop that to begin with. I mean, after all, he caused it. The pseudo-creator that you can barely live past 80 most of the time, set up the fact to cause this kind of terror in our lives. And of course, we got Dawkins here, who's more than happy to admit that as well. Well, let's move on to the statement about math, which I've always said as well.
All right, I'm being waved at to open the discussion for audience questions. I can't see who's out there. I don't know who has a microphone, but whoever
We need
does,
the
feel
lights
free to-
up. Can we have the lights up, please, in the auditorium? That's not in the
Not so much on us. Yeah,
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
Perfect.
That's not perfect. It's
Was it in your eyes?
yeah. I can just about dimly see people now.
Yeah, whoever has a mic, just jump right in.
Good evening, and thank you for a wonderful, wonderful night. I guess my question is, how do you dovetail rationality into the social and political dialogue that's going on in not just the United States, but in the world today? How do you combat irrationality with rationality at an emotional level, such that it's kind of
Yeah, so the
acceptable?
question is, did you hear it?
I did hear it. I was hoping you'd answer it.
Yeah. I can take a crack, and then you can sort of, clean up and finish it up for me.
I mean, we live in a time when rationality and truth are not respected in corridors of power. How do you reconcile? You don't reconcile them. What you do is you get out and vote the bugger out.
But I would add one quick thing on that. It's virtually impossible, I found, to have a conversation with somebody who's not going to play by the same rules. And so it's virtually impossible to use rationality to convince someone who's looking at the world and describing things in an irrational manner. And I think we once discussed this, if I'm not mistaken, but I saw a video of yours once when you had a long conversation with a woman and trying to convince her about the archaeological record, right? And I sat there and I felt for you.
Now, the bottom line is irrational with their thinking, not is irrational as a concept. It's how they interpret things. And if you don't interpret things the way they interpret things, you're a dummy.
Conversations with people about, the Big Bang and things of that sort. But it was clear that you were never going to make headway in that conversation. So you stayed with it, which is great. But that approach probably is ineffective.
Yeah,
right?
she was a hopeless case. I know who you mean. Her name is Wendy Wright, and she clearly was not listening. And you're right, that it was a totally lost cause. But remember, this was a television program, so although I was talking to her,
right,
it's irrelevant whether I could convince her. I clearly couldn't, but there would have been lots of people watching that television program.
That's true. Yeah.
Who would have been influenced by it and recognizing that she was being completely irrational. And so
In your mind.
I don't buy the argument of it, which I've heard often, that because you cannot convince the idiot you're talking to, that means that you should simply just give up. I mean,
right. Right. Yeah, I guess the quick question, but we have others. Would there be another strategy? And I don't know what the answer to that question is. And there are one or two questions from the audience still. So I think you're side.
Sure. So going back to the idea of string theory, when you guys were talking about how to actually combine the two formats of math, I guess.
Yes.
Since we are the ones that actually created math to begin with, is it possible that what we use is fundamentally flawed to describe what you're attempting to do?
Totally. It's totally.
This is very, very important that nobody really talks about. We assume somehow that math is correct. It's interesting that a lot of math has been changed and modified to clarify what the person is trying to prove in their equations. Very, very important to understand that. So I believe what was it, calculus or trigonometry? I'm not sure which one of that was, but that was actually invented to clarify a theoretical situation or theoretical equations that were being created So what happened there, Newton, by the way, is the one who did this. Newton decided that he's going to create a math to explain what his theory was all about. Now, math, and there's always a debate whether math has been discovered or created. And it's certainly a convenient way to analyze something, but it doesn't necessarily make it the right way. And again, I'm a multiist. I believe that we should use several things. Obviously, math has its purpose. And if you didn't measure things so that you can build things or use certain equations and percentages, etc., from baking a cake to making steel would be something that would be very difficult. On the other hand, when you try and explain life through a created system that creates or justifies or explains something in the manner that you wish it to be explained, which may or may not be valid, it is your opinion, then we have a problem. And this is something that nobody talks about. You know, math, as far as I'm concerned, when you get into higher math, is bogus. It has no value if you're using it in this theoretical manner. Obviously, if you're using math for a practical purpose, it is obviously essential. But does everybody do that? And these people are stuck in this reality, and they won't give any other reality a chance. And this is what we get from these kind of dumbademia people who are brainwashed in their schools of foolery to believe in a particular way. And the problem is that fine, you want to believe that, but they don't leave any room for anybody else. Generally, they make fun of you, they ostracize you, and as Sean Carroll is famous for, putting you down and saying that that just isn't true. When we have proof of metaphysics, we have proof of many things that he says he doesn't believe in, from aliens to everything else. You know, he's one of the few bogus boobs left. I remember going through this 20, 25 years ago when nobody believed in this and they used to laugh at you. Now we have thousands of people, from military people to scientists, all coming out saying that they know for sure that aliens exist. And of course, Sean Carroll doesn't believe that because he hasn't been slapped in the face with a alien hand to have him prove. But he doesn't look for the truth. He hears rumors and believes the nonsense that he's been programmed over his 30 or 40 years of brainwashing that he had at Caltech and other places. So they're not open to it. Now, nobody should believe the moon is made out of green cheese. On the other hand, we have to keep things open to many possibilities, and they don't do that. And the bottom line is their science has failed. They have equipped the worst people on the planet, politicians and military people, with weapons that can destroy the world that they made. They have not solved a single human problem. That adds up in my book that I don't give them any respect at all. They're nothing more than dupes of science, ignorant, buffoonish slobs that want to push their will on everyone else. Yeah, we need some basic science, but what we're really talking about is we need high-level engineering to apply scientific principles to something that actually works, and not to the fantasy of theoretical physics that Brian Greene is accredited for, or at other areas.
I've had, thoughts, I don't know, nightmares, that when we have these conversations with the alien intelligence that we ultimately talk to, they'll come down and say, show us, guys, what have you done? And figuring out the universe, and we pull out general relativity, quantum mechanics, we open it up, and they just sort of look, math. We tried that. It takes you part of the way, but no, you'll never get anywhere with mathematics, And the problem is, when I then try to imagine what it is that they would substitute for mathematics, I don't have the creative imagination to think of anything that isn't ultimately isomorphic to math. Math just with some different formulation that we could map onto mathematics that we currently use. So yes, it could be that we have a limited set of tools, based on the limited thing inside of our heads. It's taken us so far, but maybe it will not take us to the end.
Well, point is that he is honest. Well, that was very honest and basically very well stated. But this is the kind of conflict that is going on with a person who appears to be seeking truth that we all have to look at. What are the facts of this? What is that? Mathematics, which has been around for thousands of years and has produced a certain level of understanding, but of course our measurements and so many other things are no longer done in the ancient ways. And certainly they didn't have calculating computers and other things, yet they were able to measure things to a hair's difference in things like the pyramids. So this is very important for everybody to understand. It's really rarely stated. Institutions of folly like these people were trained in want to give you what they consider are unequivocal facts, the truth that will not change, yet it changes all the time. And to think that these mathematical systems like Newton's that was created 500 years ago and all the other ones that were modified in recent times, to think that this is the answer when they're not producing answers, remember, no problems have been solved, is something we need to be very cognizant. We have to understand the faultiness of it. And we have to go and seek better ways, meaning we have to bring in people that are more metaphysicians. Even Einstein stated that the best type of science is a metaphysician, where you look at the world in different ways and different understandings. That doesn't mean that you're steeped in superstition of silliness, that you're believing in some sort of bird god or whatever the superstitions that so many societies believe in. This, of course, is a problem because superstitious societies, again, tend to produce nothing and breed a bunch of delusional people who want to be semi-gods, as happens with, unfortunately, with the Latin countries. You get the Mexicans, you get the Latins, you get the Brazilians, all these Latins who are steeped in modern mysticism, which is then has a giant bucket of religion thrown on top of it, has created an unbelievable problem. So if you get involved with these people, which I recently have, one particular individual he didn't build on the science that he claimed he was into, homeopathy, radionics. He wanted to be a god. He wanted to put God energy into people. And he said, well, things don't work because people don't believe in God anymore. I said, yeah, because God doesn't do anything. So the whole idea is because he was a Catholic, he wanted to go back to that. Apparently he had some sort of a problem that he wanted to be some sort of Messiah and bring people in it. And of course he did his little God thing and it didn't work, plain and simple, which is so typical. So we have to be very careful, but we have the same kind of delusional thinking in our dumbademia from Caltech, MIT, etc. They're living in just an alternate religion called science. And again, that religion is just going to get you so far. And quite frankly, we have not made any serious breakthroughs. And the credibility of scientists, who there are hundreds of videos on YouTube showing how corrupt they are, will ever solve our problem. So certainly science and the educational system we have, dumbademia as I call it, is certainly not breeding better people. And this is something we need to look at in general. We need to find out, well, what can we do to keep people honest, make them honest so they produce gnosis type results, that they are seeking truth. They aren't seeking the next grant. They aren't seeking the freebies they're going to get from the oil companies. This is a real problem. And certainly these college professors are paid extremely well, have great working conditions, yet they still are constantly chasing the buck out there. And the bottom line is that colleges are all funded by corporations. And if you don't come out with something new, interesting, and different, even if you have to make it up, you tend not to get the funding. That has to change. And certainly the people that are these pseudo-intellectual types are not investigating on ways to do that. We need, they have tenure for teachers, meaning you can't be fired. Now, why would you do that? That's so that you can come out in your department and state things that other people don't like, that are supposed to be based in some rational scientific approach. But a lot of people are going to just get rid of you if you don't think the same way they do. So you were given tenure. Tenure means they can't fire you no matter what you say generally. Well, apparently that didn't work. Maybe we need tenure in regards to financing. And why does it cost so much to go to college? Why is it so expensive? It's the same thing with medical situations. Why is going to the hospital so expensive? Certainly the nurses and most of the personnel there, other than the doctors, aren't paid that much. So I don't get it. And the fact is that considering how some colleges literally have classes with hundreds of people in it, I don't quite understand what that's all about as well. This is an overly bloated and corrupt system that we have to look at. But certainly, we need to make sure that we all understand the folly of science, and they won't admit it. They won't admit the fact that there's very little that they can discover any longer because they're using arcane, stupid tools, and they have minds like we just heard from Brian here. He said, I don't have the imagination. I don't have the ability. Well, that's right. Your head is full of statistics and programming, and you're brainwashed. You're not thinking like a metaphysician, and you probably wouldn't give a metaphysician 2 minutes of your time. Oh, that's all psychobabble nonsense. That's New Age crap. And I've heard that from people before, but you're going to, if you produce that, then that's the kind of people you're going to come in contact with. The point is, even alternative people that have written books and so forth, I believe, what was it, Radin? Was it Radin, his name? Who wrote about real magic, didn't talk to any magical people. He didn't interview anybody. He came to his conclusions based on his ignorance, even though he is an quote alternative type scientist. This is a serious problem. And we're never going to get anywhere until we break this ridiculousness and start thinking outside the box, thinking from a new perspective. We've already thought for 500 years the old way established by Newton with his fake mathematics, and this is carried on to today. And the bottom line, people, no matter what they tell you, is there's little to no breakthroughs, particularly in physics, in the last several hundred years. The collider in Switzerland has produced nothing. And the results that they have produced on a very minor level, the Higgs boson, so-called particle, is not a particle. And you can't, measure that. What they're measuring, basically, the only way to really describe it is they're basically measuring the poo left behind by the collision. So the whole idea is this is so sketchy and so unbelievable to give any credit to. Nothing has been discovered. And we also have problems with credibility. Well, if they're going to act like this in general, well, how are they going to come out? So they find something that is a great discovery, and it changes mankind. It produces free energy. Well, this is a dangerous thing to produce. It produces cures, medical cures. Well, the two things that'll get your head chopped off literally is getting involved in cures and alternate energy. The world, this planet runs on petrodollars. If that ends, the entire world changes for the better, but the people with the oil and everything else are not going to give it up easily. The other area, which of course the two things in life that really control the reality we live in, is the fact of, are you well and can you keep your lights on? So these are the two areas that run this planet above everything else. The two things that everybody needs is some sort of energy. We want our computers, we want our TVs, we want all the stuff that runs on electricity. And of course, we want to enjoy that for long periods of time, which is what real health comes in. So this is a real serious problem that we need to deal with. And we need to start having classes and things. They used to have classes in ethics, how to act, what the proper way to act, what you're supposed to do. Well, we need to start teaching this more. I don't know how you teach ethics, but it was in the past. We need to start examining how we can improve the human race so they're less corrupt, stronger, live longer. Just think if we had Einstein for another 20 or 30 years, even though I'm not the greatest fan of him, but point is that generally when you reach your 60s, close to your death, is where your peak understanding is. And then everybody retires and dies. Well, the point is if people could live 20, 30 years longer, they could do some fantastic work. So, the whole system seems to be rigged on every single level. But when you're brainwashed, when you're conditioned, because you don't make it through MIT or Caltech and get degrees and become teachers because of your personal unusual thinking, you go through the system because you're a clone that they have brainwashed, and your department that gave you your PhD, etc., is going to give it to a person they agree with. This is why we have Sean Carroll, who has achieved and done absolutely nothing and continues to mislead people with his bogus physics. And of course, it's always theoretical physics. None of it is really proved. We think he may be at work, Mr. Bill. So the whole idea is this is what we run into. So it's a pretty scary world we live out there. But these were some very poignant stuff. Here we've got two guys that admit they're hypocrites. They admit that they believe in whatever makes them feel the best at that moment. And of course, he's being honest when he talks about the fact that math, which I doubt very many people actually admit, that math is what we have now, but it may not be the answer. Certainly, we've had all these mathematical systems, as I said, when it comes to Newton, and I forget what it was, trigonometry, whatever it was, calculus, I forget what he invented to explain his equations, is 500 years old. And people are still using that and still getting no answers from it, which is so typical of society. Keep banging your head against the wall because one of these days, the wall itself will cave in and you'll get to the other side. That's how science thinks, and it's sad, and it's destroying the planet, and it's doomed us. As long as our scientists and so many others continue to think like this, they are committing crimes against humanity, as well as arming psychopaths because of their own personal profit. It's really sad, but that's how the world is. It is really sad, but that's the way it is. But I'm glad at least Brian Greene was honest about science in terms of math. And if you didn't quite get that, go back, replay that section so you can hear this math solution, which is no solution.
About science and religion to a surprisingly frequent extent. I end up encountering the viewpoint that science and religion are actually one and the same thought process, that science is a form of religion in one way or another. And I try to debate that in a number of ways, but I would be interested to hear what you would have to say to someone who says, well, science really isn't any different from religion in the first place.
Well, I'll give a real quick one, and maybe Richard will follow up. There are similarities, there are radical differences, and the most radical of all is show me how to use any religious text. I don't care, pick anyone that you want. Show me how to use that to calculate the spectrum of helium. Right? So there are qualities of the world that we understand rigorously by virtue of the scientific structure.
Again, he missed the point here. It's not whether the physical reality of it, and of course that's one way of looking at it, but it's the kind of belief in science that you believe it solves everything when it doesn't, is the same type of belief in religion that people have that doesn't solve anything. So they're both religions, and they both have these rules and regulations that you follow, because if you don't, God stamps on your head, you go to hell. And of course, if you don't follow the rules of science, you'll never get anything done. So it's an interesting, and this is where people fall down, because he's not thinking again metaphysically. He's thinking literally. And of course, he wants to defend the rotting filth that regular science is by coming up with it. So it is interesting. We'll let him finish here, and then that'll be the end for this particular video.
Mathematics that makes predictions that we can go out and test, and moreover, if we test a prediction and it's wrong, we throw the thing away because we are incrementally moving toward truth, and that's quite different. And let me just quickly also add to that, just so you know that I'm not just spouting hot air. I really will put my money where my mouth is. I would be thrilled if tomorrow string theory was ruled out. I've worked on it since 1985, okay? I had black hair when I started, okay? But I'm not invested in it. I'm invested in truth, or getting closer to truth. And this is the way that we can move toward truth.
I have nothing to add to that. I mean, I think it's absolutely right. And there's a huge difference. And the difference is evidence. In massive, massive, massive quantities of evidence.
Well, again, that was an excellent explanation that Brian Greene, he has promise if he would break the reality that he is stuck in. So he's not really looking for truth. He's looking for truth in a particular box that doesn't have truth in it. And he keeps looking in the same box, keeps finding it empty, and continues the same activity. So they are not open to everything. Most of science, including string theory, most people don't believe in anymore. We have all sorts of theories and that are all been unprovable, and this has been going on for 30, 40 years now, and probably should. But why have we not progressed? We have not progressed because so many things have been overlooked, just like we have overlooked numerous free energy sources and ways of doing things, right down to hydrogen of today, which is a free energy source that everybody ignores. Simple as that. We could make hydrogen generators. Well, they're going right now. You could, to power all these things that we need electrical energy for. It's not being done because the profit isn't there. And we're not going to convert over to any new electrical generation or energy systems until every drop of oil is used out of the ground, period. So we have nothing but problems. So he wants to find truth. That's a nice way of thinking, but I think ultimately that is tied up into a giant string ball that we're never going to find where it begins and where it ends. It's just wrapped all together tighter and tighter, and no one knows where it started and no one knows really where it ended. So it's rhetoric again. You're just saying something that sounds good, and I think as a person, he kind of believes that to a degree, but you got to follow through with that. And you've got to start investigating and opening up areas of science and physics to people that have radically different beliefs that you're not going to give credit to. And nobody has to tie their wagon to it. The bottom line is that there has to be these alternative thinkers there to intermingle with the regular people there, and they will not accept you. Plain and simple. And the level of corruption on all of these levels is staggering. Corruption runs the world, runs science, runs all the dumbademia. It runs everything. And of course, it also runs alternative science, which has some of the worst people possible in alternative science that are corrupt because there's so little money in it, and connected to all of the people wanting to destroy these kind of discoveries, and they've all sold out. So it's not that one side is better than the other, but in general, these people are not allowing in alternative thinkers. They're not allowing people in to discuss different theories. So we're working on the same thing. And here he's been working on string theory, which is the latest physics theories, for 30, 40 years, 20, 30 years, whatever it is. And it hasn't worked, because nobody has the answers and nobody can think past. He's already said he has no idea how to improve math or add something to math to really create the answers that we need. That's the reality of it all. So I hope everyone understands that this is what's holding back society. And it's even more deep, dark, and corrupt than I've discussed here. But this should give you an understanding of why this world never works and why it never will. This is not a world you change. It's a world you escape from. Until next time.